shocking quality team investigations. That is the topic. And, I think before we ever kind of take that deep dive, the question that always comes up to mind is why? Why does this matter? Why is this important? And why does, at the end of the day, why does quality matter? Nick?
First foremost, it's required by law, right? 21 CFR 111 requires that we identify identity, purity, strength, and composition are evaluated for all products, and you have a robust, repeatable process for your manufacturing process to make sure you have the same quality every lot you produce. Every time your kids eat that supplement, that food needs to have that same quality within it. So just at a base level, that's what it is. But it also, for us, I think us going above and beyond getting that NSF, that USP, not only having a sense of pride in what we produce and being confident that I will even eat the product, right? I'll give it to my own children. But be able to provide that pristine state quality for, the rest of the people, the rest of the consumers out there, because that's really when you're going to have the best outcomes for those either patients or consumers. If you have a product that has great active ingredients, beautiful formula, but it has toxins in it, you're robbing Paul to pay Peter, if you will. So it's very important that we have the highest quality and we take those extra steps nobody else will. Be those leaders, not only because you expect it, because that's our values.
Exactly. And to kind of capitalize on what Nick was talking about there, that there's a regulatory requirement to it. But if you've ever seen a copy of what we call the CFR, it's a little book about that big. This is the thick version, but oh, you can't see it. There we go. It really is about this big, and it's about 1/8 this thick. That is not what the FDA wants you to follow. That's just some very basic rules that allow people to get by. But what they really want is this nice big 900-page, 8.5 by 11 deal called the preamble that tells you this is what we were thinking. So they don't go by this little book. They go by what they were thinking, and that's what you're supposed to know. And that's what so many companies don't follow.
Well, I think kind of in that summation, it's very, I guess, they broad guidelines, right? There's a lot left to potential interpretation, lack of oversight in different areas, right? And essentially there's a lot of fluidity in terms of how people define quality, right? And when we look at premier quality, and I think that's really what we'll be highlighting on tonight's discussion, it's industry redefining, right? It defines the industry in a way that why it matters or where it should matter, and going above and beyond what those broad terminologies and broad definitions really encompass. And so why quality systems matter, I think at the end of the day, is to ensure that, in my opinion, that you have the best and most potent and most safe and viable product that you can really trust in an industry that really lacks trust, right? In so many different ways.
Well put. Well put.
And I think this is, where we get into, my little discussion point of why quality matters, and that really goes into the impact on the health and the physiological systems of the individual. I mean, for all you health practitioners that are listening to this webinar and you're not familiar with Premier Research Labs, we really believe in the cellular resonance effect and the quality connection that imparts. What, in terms of a different vernacular or different verbiage and what that means for you as a health professional, that means that you have the most pure, potent product to market that can really impact and support the overall health systems of the body. Imagine if you do not have a quality system that produces a product that you can trust. You don't know how or what is in that product. You can't stand by that product as a health professional when you're making that recommendation. And I know as a practitioner, you're very keen on, delivering results to support patients' health. And so that resonance, right, that pristine, signaling of the nutrient matrix that is in that product, right, that purity, right, that is so keen to make sure that the body can respond accordingly. because as we know, the body is a sensing, living, breathing entity. We're all live here on tonight's webinar, but it responds to anything that you're consuming. That goes for the food you eat, that goes through the air you breathe, that goes through the music you consume, right? Everything that the body takes in, the body is responding to. And so when you do not have quality systems in play, your body may have a mix of signals. It may have adulterations. It may have various compounds that may elicit different responses in the body. And so when we talk about nutraceutical manufacturing and when we talk about quality, it's to ensure that that nutrient matrix that we provided in that product is really there. And so that you can trust that we are trying to elicit and harmonize the body with that plethora of different compounds appropriately, and there's nothing else in there. You don't want a microbiology assay with salmonella potentially contaminating that product and giving the product a whole bunch of different immune signaling compounds. You don't want sand in the product that may cause gut disturbances, right? If I'm looking for different herbal derivatives, I want to make sure that I have the most clean and potent different tune in terms of that herbal and botanical ingredient. And so, you know, quality really matters at the end of the day when you're trying to support health. And that's really what we here at Premier Research Labs are doing with our quality systems. Nick, Kevin, resonate with y'all?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, this just takes it to another level. You can have the best quality. Let's say a product had high microbes, so that vendor decides, you know what, I gotta heat treat it, I gotta treat it pretty high. All of a sudden, you end up with a product that's very clean in terms of no microbes, but you broke down all the active ingredients, and maybe that single active that you're looking for is not completely graded, but all the synergists and cofactors, the things that are going to support that absorption, the bioavailability. That's a key word. Bioavailability is so important. People are starting to realize it. It's not, you know, eating an orange and getting that full dose of vitamin C comparing to taking thousands of milligrams of vitamin C and only absorbing 20%. As you know, as an example, that's the difference, right? You don't have to have that quantity if you have the quality of absorption.
And to kind of build on that, it makes me think of what was the old term for it, and I'm not going to say the name of the product. It was a vitamin, a multivitamin, and it was commonly referred to as bedpan bullets because people would eat them and they would just pass right through their body and they would never end up absorbing it. So I can give you, you know, 1 million units of something. Let's say it's a probiotic. I can give you a really high number of bacteria, you know, bacterial count that's in that probiotic. But if it's not one that is right for you, if it's not beneficial to you, then what does it matter? It needs to be the right product for your body. It needs to be the right amount, not just more. More isn't necessarily better. What's the right thing and what's the right combination and how is it treated?
Well, and I know in this industry, a lot of people think more is better, but it really is the quality that counts because it's how the body is responding to that nutrient matrix that's being, you know, delivered to the body. And if that's a poor nutrient matrix, if that nutrient matrix is basically consolidated or compromised, I guess is the more appropriate term in any way, that tune that nutrient matrix is providing to the body in the form of the phytonutrients, the polyphenols, the flavonoids, the aromatic compounds, right, that make up that whole food derivative, the body is not going to have the clearest signal or the clearest message in terms of how it is going to respond. The body, in terms of our processes and every metabolic process, it requires very concise signaling and frequencies, right, to have that appropriate response. And so when we talk about quality systems and why that matters, it's essentially to ensure that there is no, I guess, other rock band playing in the background of the symphony of the nutrient matrix that your products, you know, that you're taking. And the industry there's a lot of rock band and concerts going on in the background and a lot of different other products is kind of the analogy that I would make. And the body can't hear, you know, the message that the nutrients are trying to provide. So little distillation, but good analogy in my opinion. using
your analogy, what we're trying to put together is a highly organized symphony where each one of the sounds makes the right sound, and we don't want to have that kazoo in the background.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, everybody's probably has a picture of a kazoo now, and maybe we're just gonna give you the title, Kevin, of Chief Kazoo Manager of Quality Systems. So
works for me.
Pertinent. So, I think this is a good question. Oh, sorry, this kind of slide went. This is a good question or good talking point, Nick. With where Premier is currently at, where is the industry in regards to quality systems? Nick?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a red herring that the FDA just doesn't have the capacity or the funding to really support a $55 billion industry. Just recently, congratulations to Carol Welch, who was on the Natural Product Alliance, NPA, for a while. So she's a great new director of Office of Dietary Supplements. She's going to be the new director, which is great. But she only leads another team, about 30 below her, for a $55 billion industry. We have about 30 almost in our quality department for just our company. So, I think it's important to realize they're trying to do as best as they can, but it's just a lack of resources. And we see this issue with inspections. COVID happened in 2020. So there was a significant drop in inspections. We also saw a drop next this coming year. But before I go into that, a lot of this kind of leaves it to the manufacturer to do a little bit of self-regulation, and to the industry to do as much self-regulation as possible. And there's a lot of tools, right? You have all these tools here in terms of general chapters guidance, these other UNPA, American Botanical Council, giving different monograms, and just a lot of resources, if you will. If you look, they're all there. Even the FDA gives a lot of resources. They even tell you what they're going to expect when they come inspect. Literally have a checklist you can just go off of, and that's exactly what they're going to look at. So you just got to put the time in to understand what you need to do. A couple other transparency items just to mention here is down here, there's a couple links, these dashboards. Literally, you can now, which is great for transparency, see what the results are of FDA inspections for different companies. I encourage all of y'all to go to these, this link. The first one right there is the inspections. Look us up. You'll see that we have 0 483s in our history. Look up another, one of your other favorite manufacturers. It's a really cool tool. Shows you exactly what was found, if there was, and then, what was that finding. The second one is talking about the advisory list for ingredients, things that are known to be in the industry that they don't have the manpower to enforce, to take off the market, but you should be a little bit concerned. The stimulants and the sports supplements that are known to be in sports supplements right now that they just can't take off the market, they're in there. So just, be aware, I guess, is the best thing to do. If you go to the next slide, talking about inspections, you see also there was a, if you go to the next one, Will, I don't know if you can.
A little delay here. We're having fun because we're recording this live, so.
And Nick, if I can say something about what you were talking about, the banned ingredients or the recognized ingredients, which shouldn't be used. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on several manufacturing sites or manufacturing groups, and there's not a week that goes by that there's not somebody reaching out and saying, hey, does anybody have a source for item X? Mm-hmm. And they're talking about the ones which should not be used. So people are actively searching for sites of those. These are manufacturers that are looking for these.
Yeah, and it's a sad thing is they're looking for these because they give you a clinical effect, but one of the side effects could be death. So literally, that's, this is all about that clandestine adulteration, which I have another presentation I do on it too, where people are putting, drugs, cheaply made analogs of drugs into dietary supplements to give it that clinical effect. And usually this is in the weight loss / sexual enhancement, CBD, cognitive now. and they're getting these analogs from, you know, usually abroad, you know, it could be India, China, where it's made with cheap labor. You get this over here and, oh, wow, this product works like Viagra. Well, it's because they put, you know, synthetic Viagra in there. That's not really the pure stuff. And then all of a sudden you get a heart attack or whatever. So it's very scary. It happens to this day that you see these issues. Back to the whole inspection, just talking about this is post-COVID 2021. There was only a matter, usually they're doing about 5%. So it was even a drop below that to 4% of the industry. They say there's about 80,000 supplements on the market, over I think about 9,000 to 10,000 manufacturers, and they're only doing about 4% of that. I mean, it was a very small amount of inspections, and a lot of the time, it's half of those are re-inspections, and this is all due to really capacity. So once again, being aware of the product you're taking, asking the right questions of the manufacturer to make sure they're going above and beyond. And they say, yeah, well, we do all the required testing. What's required and what really to make a good product is two different things.
I think that's so pertinent. And just for you relate a very key, I guess, fact in terms of our quality team compared to even what the oversight committee and their quality, it was previous, I think you said 30, and we actually have an appropriate number just on staff here in terms
Correct.
of.
Yeah, it's almost, it's about the same for the whole $55 billion industry compared to just our company.
Just let that sit in for all of our viewers. If you're not familiar with Premier, I mean, that's.
Yeah, and it's the way it's been and it's the way it is. And hopefully we can get some more funding to be able to do more, because there's a lot of bad actors out there making the industry, you know, look bad. And if everybody can take that extra step, you know, hopefully follow a little bit of our lead, this industry would grow in terms of the quality that it provides, period.
Regarding the number of people that we have on staff, a huge amount of what we do is just investigation into raw materials. What does this raw material have? How is it processed? How do they do that? Is there a potential contaminant? Is there not? How do we react to that? It's not just testing the product that we receive in, but it's performing investigations into stuff that we might use to find out, you know, so that way we can make sure we don't bring in what we shouldn't be bringing in.
What Kevin's talking about is that current part of the current good manufacturing practices. Science and methods continue to evolve, and we have to evolve with them. And so as we learn something new or something comes to light that we didn't know from either a manufacturing process or something, we're going to investigate it, make sure everything is what it thinks that it seems to be. And once we know with complete confidence it is that, then we take action, whatever that is. But that takes a team, that takes a lot of expertise to make that happen.
I mean, it's acting on the scientific method and embodying those principles day in and day out. And, you know, you get new data, you get new information, you change, right? As a health professional, if you're listening to this, you know, you don't necessarily use the same strategies that you did with the client 10 years ago, because information and scientific data has, you know, come out in light of, you know, educating you and changing your direction, right? And I think it's so pertinent as a manufacturer that you're always looking at new quality systems and new ways of testing and new, you know, data points that you can collect so that you can develop and strategize so that you are improving on existing formulas even more than they were before, right? It's all about growth, I think, in this industry, and we're just trying to make the best iteration and the best version of our product possible. So we're never satisfied, right, Nick?
Nope. Go ahead. Well, in terms of this, I just wanted to mention, you know, why we keep always talking about quality is really the top observation, or the top 483, if you will, which is kind of think of it as a ticket of not doing the correct thing per the regulations or what's required, has always been production and process controls. That's E. That's the red 34% in this graph right here. And that is always usually the number one violation, and that contains testing specifications. Either they don't set up the spec to say what needs to be tested to ensure it is for that it has the components evaluated for identity, purity, strength, and composition, and a lack of contaminants, or they're just not testing at all, period. They just don't do the testing. Or they do a lot of tests that really are not fit for purpose, don't make sense. So this has been the same way since the beginning of GMPs. It doesn't change at all each year, literally over and over again. Yeah, it's a small sample size of the amount of people that are looking at, but while we keep harping on, you know, you got to do the right testing, you need to make sure you do the proper testing and go above and beyond, because a lot of companies are not even doing testing or not even knowing they need to. So we just need to make the industry aware of that problem.
I mean, this is really a flag in the sand moment, or a line in the sand, I guess, with Premier in terms of, you know, we are asking or requiring that we test. I mean, we're going beyond what the FDA is saying to test for, right? And we'll be getting into some of these tests here and some of these case studies here shortly. But, you know, I think this really feeds into our next slide, which is the PRL mission statement, right? And going above and beyond this industry and creating a healthier community by connecting customers with pristine state nutritional support. I mean, without doing the testing, without having the quality systems, without doing the investigations, we can't, I wouldn't have any confidence in relaying this mission statement. And I think if your company that you're working with isn't able to demonstrate the tests and speak to the data and speak to what methods they're performing, I think there's a big cause for concern, in my opinion. Fair enough. All right. And, you know, Nick, would you like to highlight, I could go on and on in regards to how these two certificates speak volumes to that mission statement, but.
Yeah, you know, third-party CGMP certifications are not required, actually. You know, it really what separates what the good companies from the great companies by having these certifications. And we went above and beyond and got 2 of them. Not only USP that goes above and beyond 21 CFR 111, but NSF. And we're very proud of these. And I'm very proud to also mention that this last NSF audit, which we added on there, kind of what our findings were. And literally, if you look, it's 0, 0, 0, and an A. Doesn't get better than that, honestly. We have a great team with Kevin and the rest of quality, all 30 plus, that really make this happen. And that's not just them, also, it's all manufacturing, everything having to, it's quality within our system rather than just a quality department. So, you know, amazing job to the team, what they've done, and kind of just speaks volumes, I think, of, you know, what our standards are for our product and our processes.
And one of the things that can happen is you can build yourself into your own little echo chamber. We know that we're doing things right. We know that we are doing the best that we can see that we need to do. But there's a certain point where maybe you say, you know what, I'm doing so good, I don't need to do anything different. This is nice, bringing in not only third-party auditors, but these are probably the 2 most stringent third-party auditors in the world. And bringing in someone who has an extremely high requirement to get their certification, bringing them in to confirm whether we are or not, and then reacting to, Will, like you said, the scientific method. Show me something new, show me what I'm not doing, let me correct, let me do that. So we have extreme confidence in our system because we have had it validated from outside.
Yeah, I guess for all the health practitioners that aren't familiar with CGMP and third-party certifications, this, in my opinion, in regards to a scientific study, would be the review. I guess you put your study out into a journal, and then people submit feedback on the article, and they essentially find where it may have gone awry, right? And so I think anybody here at Premier would say, hey, come, we're not just saying it, come see for yourself, in regards to our quality systems, which is a testament. I mean, we stand by it because we don't have anything to hide. We want everybody, I mean, come for a tour if you're listening. Just schedule that appropriately. Well, I think as we, you know, just for people to kind of visualize our quality system and really, the PRL quality system flow. Nick, do you kind of want to walk people through the journey to the end product in terms of, where we're testing and how, and maybe in some situations?
I'll let Kevin go over it. He's more on the ground, in the trenches, if you will. Go ahead, Kevin.
Sure. The entire thing starts off with auditing our product supplier. We do a combination of what we refer to as a desk audit, looking at reports they have, looking at investigations that happen with that company, FDA audits, anything that goes on. Are they on a watch list for various ingredients or problems? And then also a physical audit, going out and seeing what they're doing. We just have one of our people. This is another reason why we have such a big staff. We have a guy that just went out for a multi-day audit with one of our suppliers, make sure that they were doing what they're supposed to do, not just what they say they're doing, but going in and actually seeing the facility to confirm that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Then we request in samples of the material we're going to be getting from them. We perform testing before we even buy the first lot. We check to make sure that the product is what it's supposed to be like. Then we get the raw material in. All raw materials come in with what they refer to as a C of A, certificate of analysis. First thing we do with that C of A is throw it in the trash, because TAL, they all lie. So we have our own written we don't throw it in the trash. We're required to keep those, and we use them to reference against.
Disclaimer,
so we
disclaimer.
Disclaimer, exactly. So we have our own written specifications, and don't go back to it, but if you look at that slide that was earlier, the top 10 483s, consistently failing to have written specifications that you're going to test your product against, and then performing the proper testing to see if it actually meets those specifications. Those are constantly failings that are seen in facilities. So we do test against our specifications using multiple tests, which Nick's going to go into in a little bit. Once we do that, we create the product. Now, we've already tested the sample before it came in. We tested the raw materials before they arrived. Now we're going to test the product again once it's in its final state. Did we contaminate it somewhere along the line? We're a great company, but we're not perfect. Did we make a mistake? Let's check and make sure. Is our blend correct? All of this happens again. So multiple tests at multiple stages of the process. And then finally, the label is created for the product. C of A is generated for the product, and it's ready to go to the customer. Only after we've confirmed that everything matches the specifications which we have.
And I think, just to kind of highlight one portion of that, Kevin, would you say that the industry as a whole is, auditing the product supplier at the same stringency that we here at Premier? Is that a standard in terms of those audits? Is that required, I guess?
There's a requirement to qualify, but how you qualify is a little bit open to interpretation. Now, like we said, that little book doesn't have every piece of information in there. Not only that, when you're talking about the testing, whether it be the raw material coming in or the finished product testing, there are some companies out there that test in the raw material stage. There are some companies out there, this is perfectly acceptable. There's something called skip lot testing. And skip lot testing says, I can get this, I can get in that pre-sample, that pre-ship sample. I'm going to test that pre-ship sample. It tests good. I'm going to do that 3 times. Now I don't need to retest the raw material for whatever it is I write up in my SOP. So I may write in that I'm not going to test them again for a year. I'm not going to test them again for 2 years, which means every time it comes in, I'm just relying on that C of A. As you're going to see in a little bit, we've had product from very good vendors that there was just some sort of failure in their system, which we caught because we do test every single lot that comes in. We're not doing skip lot testing. So these are kind of things that you're going to find that differentiate our quality system from a lot of the quality systems that are out there.
going above and beyond, what the industry requires, right? In terms of what's in that little book and the broad definitions that encompasses. So,
but it's, and I agree with you there, but it's not above and beyond what you need to do to ensure that the product is what it's supposed to be.
It's pertinent as well. Well, I think it's time to maybe take a deep dive in what that really looks like in action. And I think we have one of our first case studies here to kind of set the stage for our future discussions. Nick?
Yeah, so this is one of the instances where we show the power of HPTLC and microscopy and how they work together as that orthogonal testing, which is basically orthogonals looking using multiple techniques with a single endpoint, single goal, looking at different ways, and each test has its advantages and disadvantages. Here, this is a HPTLC, high performance thin layer chromatography, which is basically looking at the fingerprint of the phytochemicals within that botanical. Here's alfalfa leaf. You can see these little bands that are colored bands that are looking at a certain wavelengths. And those are all kind of markers of different phytochemicals coming out of this TLC plate. You can see the sample in lanes 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5, and 6 are reference samples, and they match up beautifully. I mean, it's definitely alfalfa is what we got. The issue is with HPTLC, you don't see the cellulose or these other inorganic materials maybe that are in there, or something this test doesn't actually see on there. So we employ microscopy to take a little bit deeper look at the actual features under a microscope, the histological features. And when we took that sample and looked under a microscope, we saw two things. A, there are starch granules there, and there shouldn't be aggregates of starch granules, which means there was added starch. Don't know if it was intentional or separate, but starch was there and it was contaminated with that, which HPTLC wouldn't have picked up. The other one, the scary part of it all, there was a amorphous crystalline material that we believe was glass, actually ground glass in the product, basically micronized, if you will, maybe during the grinding process or somehow found its way into the product. But as you can see from that first picture, it was a beautiful HPTLC. And then when you come over here, and if you only did that one, none the wiser, right? Nobody would have questioned it. In fact, you put on a CA, they would be like, wow, look at that. Looks pretty, doesn't it? Until you look a little deeper. And, that's, very CSI looking. And then when you look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, the next page is the ugly, right? So you get to see that, but that's what you want to know, because you don't want to consume that. You don't want to give that to your kids. And the scary thing of all this is, and we're going to show you from everything today, realize we don't buy everything, and somebody's probably eating this somewhere. So that's a known fact. And when we reject it, what is the vendor doing with that material even? It's very powerful to have both, and why we use orthogonal testing on all botanicals here.
Yeah, I think you can't take just one person's advice. You have to source information from a multiplicity of different sources, right, before you come up with the ultimate conclusion of if it's good or bad. I mean, that's as any health professional in terms of strategies that you're utilizing with your patient, don't take just my word, take, different sources and reference material, build that knowledge base so that then you're the expert in terms of implementation and acting. This is our quality system in action in regards to that redundancy of information. So, Kevin, any thoughts?
No, I think Nick pretty much hit it all there. One of the things that we don't have on here slide-wise is one that we saw with, the carrot powder.
Mm-hmm.
Carrot powder came in, you look at it, it's orange, smells like carrot. Run it under a certain test, you have proper protein levels and things like that. Looks like carrot. And so you just sign it off as carrot. However, we did that one extra test and turned out to be modified cornstarch dyed orange. So what do you need to do to determine whether something really is what it is?
I think there's pitfalls in different tests are meant to measure specific things.
Correct. And what do you want to measure?
Right. And so if you're only running run tests, you're turning a blind eye to a different aspect of an ingredient, right? Because the test is specified for one aspect, one
Sure.
objective, quantitative or qualitative analysis. Not the
am I running the test to see whether it really is what it is, or am I running the test just so I can release a material and make a product to sell?
So
big
pertinent.
difference.
Well, I think we have a kind of another one with, I guess, turmeric here.
Yeah, so this one's also an interesting one. Let me just backpedal a little bit to what Kevin said, and what just in general, doing organoleptic testing, which is an accepted methodology in certain cases. So, getting a powder in, you're not going to be able to tell that powder is really alfalfa or even, turmeric. It may seem like it looks pretty close, but you don't know if there's something else in there. Now, if you get whole turmeric root in, like actual, fingers of turmeric, you can then do some organoleptic testing. Now, there's other tests like aflatoxins and other things you need to do, heavy metals. But in that case, when you have that microscopy, if you will, that whole material, you can ID it that way. And that's not a problem. Broccoli, for example, and stuff like that. When you get into these herbs, sometimes they can look very similar to a related species. So it's very hard then to just ID it by visual or, smell. But there is a place for it, but most of the industry is getting powdered material or so. And so that doesn't, it's not fit for purpose, if you will. Turmeric here, and what we see a lot of times with turmeric, I think I want to say 70% of the US is taking some kind of turmeric supplement or using it in their diet somehow, is very popular. And with very popular items, the chances of adult
Nick froze up.
I think he was going to say the chances of adulteration are much higher.
Very high.
Adulteration go up exponentially.
We finished your statement. So
no, I heard that, so I could hear you. It's exponential, the chances of adulteration, and we saw with this turmeric come in, it looked fine on the HPTLC. But they try to get tricky, and they know that turmeric's a lot of starch in it. So if we go to the next slide, and like I said, with this HPTLC, I wouldn't question it, but once we put it on the microscope, even if putting it on the microscope, there's turmeric is a root, so it has a lot of starch in it, period. But when they added the other starch, the way the starch aggregates, like these little squares, these little UFOs, if you will, inside the powder, that shouldn't be there. It shouldn't, the truth is out there. That's not how it's supposed to be. And it takes a trained eye to be really able to identify that. One of the reasons we partner with some of the best minds in the industry, because we know we can rely on them to catch these subtle differences that leads to knowing that it has been highly contaminated with added starch that's been, with color to weigh down the material. And once again, we see this with items a lot of times that are used quite a bit. Why is olive oil and honey one of the most adulterated items? Because the world consumes more than it produces. And, that's where you can make the quick buck, even though it's, only a little bit you're adding in, you're selling a lot of material. So they can get pretty sneaky, but you have the right quality system, the right test methods, the right personnel working on this, you'll be able to catch 99% of the items out there.
I think that's so important. It goes into almost like when you have a refined taste for a food, and you can almost just taste, right, as a connoisseur, when it's of optimal quality, and it takes a trained eye or a trained somebody that's been in the industry for years to sometimes see these discrepancies, right? I mean, the average microscopist, is that microscopist? I don't know if that's an actual career, but individual trained in microscopy, it could take years to get to this level of proficiency. So pertinent. Let's well, I think so. Great way of kind of segueing into our top 20 21 adulterations for the year, this past year, because, those were case studies, I guess over the past couple of years, right? But I think they really introduce some key features to our quality systems, which is that orthogonal testing, not just taking one test for granted and, passing it along. It's that redundancy and having a system behind what you do, not just one aspect to what you do, right? So we'll just dive right in, gentlemen?
Go right in.
All right.
Okay, so this was our case 1186. This was with a fig fruit, and this was supposed to be just a regular fig powder we got in. Had a history of purchasing this for our inflammaside and great products. Fig has actually a proteolytic enzyme called physin in it, which is good for helping support inflammation, if you will, to reduce it. So it's very important. We tested by HPTLC, and what we found was, and I think you can go to the next slide maybe on this one if it's there, that you can see lanes 10 and 11 here is a sample. 12, 13, 14, 15, well, 12, 13, 14 are actually referencing it as a fig. And you can notice that even at the lowest level there at 12, you can still see stronger bands than any of our samples. And what this came out, and I've talked about this before, and it still happens to this day. This is a recent example of people taking a fruit powder or herb or something, extracting out all the nutrients, if you will, the active ingredients, and instead of the what's left over, it's called the mark, using that for feed or some other compost or something else, they're selling that as well, trying to make as much money off that material as possible, saying this is fig powder. Well, yeah, it's fig, it's a fig shell, I guess you can call it. Everything else has been pulled out, and it's really none of the active items in there. In fact, the reports show that during the extraction of testing, it usually comes out as a viscous liquid, and it was not that. So basically everything that was good or made it, let's say, effective, if you will, was missing. So it's still happening today. We see this, that they're trying to pass through this subpotent dilute material as true, botanical powders, when it's really just the shell of that botanical powder.
I think if there was a judge and a jury, I'd say guilty for poor quality.
But it is fig powder. Keep in mind, it is fig powder. So technically somebody could use this and somebody put that in their product.
Yeah, so they could
have the levels to really do anything.
So they could essentially list like fig powder. They're not, making necessarily like a phytonutrient claim or a specific derivative claim. They're just saying, hey, I added this fig powder into the product, right?
Yeah, it was just, a 0.1% fig powder.
Well, and that's, Nick, that's similar to, what was it? Now, sometimes it's economic adulteration, where people do this on purpose just to, basically cutting the product. I can take this fig powder and turn it into twice as much.
Right.
Then sometimes it happens just by nature of the process, not testing to see whether their process works. What was it? Valerian root that was extracted using water instead of alcohol?
Correct. And basically there's that drive in the industry to keep a product, keep the cost the lowest it can, right? But still meet industry demand. In that particular example, they extracted out with a solvent that really didn't pull out the valerianic acid. So that product was really, that raw material was not really going to, its intention to help and promote sleep, relaxation. You wouldn't really get that with that sample, even though you would be able to call it organic. So, at the end of the day, just because you call it organic, but it does nothing, you're getting clean garbage. That's basically what you're getting. So,
right.
I think this is very pertinent in terms of when nutrition that really works, you really want a, phytonutrient matrix or an identity that is, can really speak in, at least in a HPTLC scan to hold up to spec. So, yeah, key in that regard. Well, going on to item number 2 from our, I guess, top 9, our organic celery case.
Yes, so this was a celery seed, even though it shows the stalks, that we got in. You can go into the next slide. It shows the, basically this was a cross, what we found was what you expect as a consumer, as a practitioner for your patients, is that whatever we say is in that product, it's celery seed and nothing else. And what happened here, you could see, it's kind of apparent on the left one, but on the right one, especially that red, that lighter red hue, 2 big bands. That's our samples 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the reference standards, actually celery seed. And you notice the red hue there on the left is right above 0.5 is not present in the other ones. So, and that's actually indicative of a carver crawl band, which you're going to find in oregano. So it's either, you know, during the processing when they cut up the material, like maybe they ran oregano beforehand and a lot of the oils got in there, or there's cross contamination with oregano oil or other oregano pieces. But there's a substantial amount of carbachol which shouldn't be present in the celery seed. So kind of, you know, if we did microscopy, it was fine. We didn't see any really issue with it because probably it was the essential oils and all that within the product. But you pay for a specific product, you're expecting a specific product, especially with protocols. And that's what you want to use, not find out later that maybe there was an interaction that you could have avoided because you didn't know there was something else in there. So that's the power of doing HPTLC, seeing these additional bands where in microscopy that we didn't even see it.
And I mean, just to set the stage for the audience, I mean, this essentially organic celery seed arrived ground, correct?
Right.
And so, you know, it's one of those situations where you can't do the organoleptic, you know, visual kind of confirmation. You're having to do the test. It passed microscopy, and then we run it on a HPTLC, and we see a band, and we're like, well, what is this? What could this band be? And you know, potentially oregano, right?
Yeah, you could even smell the oregano on it. So
oh, you could, okay.
Yeah,
But
so it has a fragrance of oregano, even though it's celery seed. It was celery seed, right? There definitely was celery seed, but it had oregano, even in like maybe essential oil in there. Maybe there was a spill. Who knows? When they manufacture, they're making the essential oil next to it. I don't know, but it was contaminated either way.
And would this be a type of test that we run on, you know, I think going to the flow chart that we started at, you know, we have the raw material, we test the raw material, and then we test the gathered ingredients together in the end product. We would potentially re-verify this at every step of the process for our own cross-contamination purposes.
From the samples and the raw material, yes, we would kind of repeat the test. We almost do double testing, if you will. A lot of times companies, vendors require us to do the sample testing because we don't, what we test for, they don't test for. So if we don't, they won't actually sell us the material if we don't do that because they're concerned that it may fail.
Well, says a lot. Well, I think organic celery has us on a roll here. So going into item number 2.
So we're going to kind of switch gears and look a little bit at, microbes. We do see some instances of, for example, this red algae, the aerobic plate count. Now, red algae, the way it's processed, harvested, usually don't see too high, honestly, at all, high levels of aerobic plate count. But and we have a long history of purchasing this material and never seen anything above 100 CFUs. But we saw in the 1,000 to 10,000 range a particular lot that came in. Worked with the vendor back and forth. Literally, you know, these investigations sometimes take months to do because you're, trying to verify methods, see if there's an issue at the laboratories. But in this one, there's a particular, we weren't in agreement on the methods for testing, but our method was showing a much higher plate count, and I don't care what method you do. If you do a method and it shows microbes to be present, it's not like I can fake microbes to go more in there unless we contaminate it ourselves, right? So, at the end of the day, we were able to reject this, but it's just highlights that even the cleanest materials that we've always seen, never had an issue, can, have these problems pop up. And it's our standard. We could have possibly used this material if, we fudged our specs, but we're not going to do that. That's not, quality without compromise, right?
And this one is also a good example of, we had bought this many, many times before. If we were doing skip lot testing, we would have just said, put it on the shelf, use it, because it passed sometime in the, a previous lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think kind of the conversation around, if it fails at one level, or, what's your, I guess, the risk tolerance that you're comfortable with in regards to an aerobic count. And I guess people have different standards, right? Even for, different assays and what in terms of microbiological load may be, right? I mean, to be fair, there may be a set minimum, but beyond that, it may not be. It's up to interpretation in terms of whether you accept or reject a material. Is that fair, Nick?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Nick, you can talk more on this, but we set our standards. We set a written standard. This is our limit. It's not like we exceeded our limit. Okay, what can we do to fudge the numbers to make it pass? We set our numbers of what they're supposed to be. It's really black and white.
Yeah. It's not like you open the fridge and you're like, this smells a little off, but I'll still take it, or I'll still eat it, right?
Some people can justify that, say, oh, well, it's not, it's not a pathogen, so we should be fine, but it's an indicator, and you can't test every sample in the lot, right? You couldn't test everything, otherwise you wouldn't have any raw material left. So, you're taking a statistical sample, it's an indicator. That's where we draw the line.
I think our next case from 2019 is kind of along the same basis with sunflower phospholipid.
Yeah, it's
a little too ahead there. Sorry, y'all. Uh-oh. We're just going to show all of them now. All of our tricks are being showcased as we speak.
So they're just
Yep. You want to start with the sunflower phospholipid?
Yeah, I'll just go through all of these. The next couple ones, all the way to pea protein, are all microbes. The sunflower is an example of more highly, not necessarily highly processed, but more processed material than a botanical. And you saw above threshold limits for aerobic plate count. Once again, an indicator. We, was able to identify, must have been something in the process, how they process it to lead to that failure, because we've never seen it in the past. The next one, in terms of lutein zeaxanthin, also is kind of a similar example. The lutein zeaxanthin, to process it, you have to use solvents to extract it, so you expect it to be at a much lower level. And we found that we found the aerobic plate count to be above our threshold, and for the fungi to be present, which is, we don't normally see that because you're extracting out. Now, we use a specialized microencapsulation process with pea protein and other natural substances rather than the synthetics, or what's normally used in the industry. So it could have been from there, but we've never seen this issue. And once again, it was in a certain amount of the boxes. It wasn't actually in every box like this. So we were able to reject this lot because we were not going to test every single box. It was quite a few boxes, but wasn't consistent. And without, if you just test one box and say that's all we're going to test, then you're not doing square root n plus 1. Sampling is so important to really be able to catch the issues. I can tell you, one time we had, this is not micro, but it was a cinnamon. It was supposed to be Burmani from Indonesia, and they put that on top of the barrel, and then down below they put the cassia, which is the cheaper, higher coumarin content, and we didn't want that. And because they believed everybody was just going to scoop off the top, we used 3-tier sampling thieves. So to make sure we catch that, plus for settling purposes. So sampling properly, sampling statistically adequate amounts of the lot to be able to interpret, say this, there's a lot of confidence that this is really representative of the whole lot, is so important. You can have the best test, all the right tests, but if you don't sample right, it doesn't really matter.
couldn't agree more. You can't just take one person's word of advice. Like I said, you got to pull from different narratives to get the clear picture. So
the last one you showed was pea protein. I'm going to go into that one real quick. This was actually, we did find salmonella, believe it or not. We buy lots of pea protein, quite a few lots, and this one had salmonella. We detected it, went through a huge investigation because that's a pretty big deal when you find it in the raw material. And the vendor tested their samples. We retested, looked at all laboratory contamination. We had all the controls in place. Everything, we saw said that this was a true result. Tested again, didn't find it again, but meaning that it's probably at low levels. And most companies, not most companies, but companies will take that retest and say, oh, we didn't see it again, so it must have been, lab error, even though there's no actual evidence to support that. They'll just say, oh, the second test is fine, that's what we use. We don't take that, in fact, that's what the vendor suggested, the retest is fine, so everything is good. We're not going to take that risk. We're not going to compromise, your family, that's somewhere in this lot, somewhere that there be maybe another salmonella in there, because once again, we can't test everything. So we kind of take a hard line there, and we rejected it, despite the complaints we have from the vendor that most people would just retest and then use it. So that's where we draw the line there.
I mean, that really showcases the premier difference. I mean, having a risk tolerance and saying, hey, we saw this, we're not going to accept this regardless of what you tell us to do, and pushing back on the vendor, even though there was another test that came up completely fine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's essentially asking the question, would you eat it, know that it fell on the floor, right? You had a piece of food, and I mean, depends on the food maybe for me, but just it's the question, it had this exposure that came up with this, result, and,
Well, and to kind of put that into perspective, a lot of people don't realize what volumes of material we get in. I can't speak for how large this lot of pea protein was, but if we were to dump it all out, picture a pretty good sized pile of green dirt right there. And over on one side, over on one corner, we know that is contaminated with salmonella. Now, that's a very, very small chunk of that pile. But I take that pile, I put it into boxes, and now I'm going to say, I'm going to make you a product, and it's a crapshoot. One of you is going to get that salmonella. Which one of y'all gets it? And you have to look at it from that perspective. If it shows up at all, that means that it's there somewhere, and somebody's going to get it.
Yeah.
That's something I ever want to sell, in my opinion.
Agreed. New product coming out next week. So,
right.
Salmonella capsules.
Great laxative. So I'm going to go right into one of my passions here is this test, and I'm not passionate about aflatoxin. I'm passionate about detecting it. Aflatoxin is a known carcinogen, cancer-causing agent produced by mold. It's a mycotoxin. It's a very dirty, dangerous compound that's naturally occurring, happens in the environment. Usually it's going to be in botanicals or something that's wet, moist, because that mold will produce that aspergillus that will produce these toxins. Cayenne pepper, we've had, a history of having problems with cayenne pepper. You go to the next slide here. We have, you'll see multiple lots having intestates where we had multiple lots come in where we had, levels of mycotoxin or aflatoxin above the acceptable FDA limit. We'd like to see nothing there at all, but 5 is the allowable limit. So we saw this, we see this history. So it's, there's a history there, and cayenne is an herb of concern, if you will. The pepper is a pepper of concern for micro, and maybe the drying process, maybe it's not dried properly or quickly enough, and that mold's there to produce that toxin. Moving on to the next one, we see now an instance where, I have history there, so I'm hyper alert of that happening again, right? But I test every botanical for aflatoxin, and we saw this with chase tree, this cancer-causing fungal toxin. If you go to the next slide here, Will, you'll see that we have no history of ever seeing this in the product, and then boom, you saw this this last year of 63. I mean, I've never seen that high before. We confirmed that was that high, and it had to be just something in the drying process or where it was grown. It just had high levels. You know, we'll never give you anything we detect with aflatoxins, but you know, this is a great thing to talk about our Mediclay. Our Mediclay has been with clinical studies showing that it can actually bind to aflatoxin as a detox. Excellent product, but we're not going to put Mediclay into every product we have and just ignore this. I'd rather just not give it to you. But always remember, you're probably getting some from the food you eat and everything else. So taking Mediclay every day is highly recommended and very safe.
Why does the industry not, make it a standard? I mean, is aflatoxin testing?
You have to test for identity, purity, strength, and composition, right? Very vague, and lack of contaminants. This would be the lack of contaminants part of this. Purity. You can just test, you can fulfill that requirement by doing one thing, and this is something that they've chosen not to do. Most vendors don't do this. Most manufacturers are not screening for it. It's a little bit of an afterthought. But once again, I can show you for these two items that, it does happen. You do get it, and then you get a product. Yeah, it's chase tree. It's great, but for female health, but it has aflatoxins, which kind of hurts you in another way.
Think of the immune signaling and the stress on the body and all
correct. You're doing an exchange there of your health. So that's why we will not ever not test aflatoxin every single ingredient in terms of botanicals that we have.
I think it's such a quality standard that redefines and reshapes and gets people asking appropriate questions for their manufacturer, right? Why aren't you testing?
This is one of the tests that the vendors make us, because we test this, that they don't. They want to, they don't want to for us to get the whole lot and then us reject it. Even though that still can happen because of the sampling they do. But it's one of those tests that most vendors out there are not testing for, period.
Well, as a health professional, I mean, I wonder if our audience is even asking the question, with all the dried herbs and botanicals that they're using, have they even assessed, or do they have any clarity on aflatoxin testing with what they're using? I mean, it may not even be known. Some people may know about pesticides, right, and inorganic residues and heavy metals, right, but aflatoxins, it's
definitely not a conversation happening in the industry unless it's that conversation's with us.
So pertinent. Well, I think this is our final top 9 of.
Yeah, kind of bring it all around. I talked about this, earlier with celery seed about, you expect to have what we say in the bottle and nothing else, right? That's the expectations as defined by FDA. This product, if you go to the next slide, was oregano that came in. And what we saw was the first two, lane 7 and 8, was the oregano samples that we gave. And then 9, 10, 11, and 12 are the actual reference, meaning that's actual oregano. And then 13, 14 are thyme. So if you notice the bright yellow lines there, bands, and they're in our oregano, which they shouldn't be. And what we found was, and that with this sample, and actually we got another sample of a different lot from this vendor, same thing. There's a cross-contamination of oregano with thyme. Thyme is not bad, but that, once again, that's not what that's what we're telling you is in there. It's adulterated because of that cross-contamination, either through how they packaged it, grinding, who knows, but there was a significant amount in there. Maybe how they grew the materials next to the field, right next to the thyme field, I don't know. But whatever the case is, it was definitely a case of cross-contamination. Many companies may just say, oh, it's oregano for sure, we'll just not label the thyme. But that is what we found here, and it kind of comes back to that integrity, transparency. Where do you draw the line here? Thyme is not bad. You know, thyme is actually really good for you. But
Sort of probably made a great spice rub for a Mediterranean dish or
yeah, right.
something like that. Yeah.
But we're giving you is oregano, and that's how you're basing your assessments, your protocols, and everything else. And that's, you know, we want to make sure you get the purest substance to get the best outcomes.
Well, I think this HPTLC is a firecracker of a discussion point to end on. Just look at the colors there, and it really helps you visualize, you know, in terms of, you know, where you can see the overlap. Because I mean, I'm looking at, you know, the left hand side, I'm looking at the right, and I'm like, they match up, but it also kind of mixes in with the middle here. If for an untrained eye, you can really see, you know, where this has the adulteration and the question around that. So.
Yeah, I mean, my 2-year-old could say, does this match this, right? 7, 8, but 9 to 12 does not match, right? So, but anyways, yes.
Well, on that note, gentlemen, I think this was.
Oh, actually, I forgot about this picture. So we did the HPTLC, and we also saw which was uncharacteristic polygrains in the inner epidermis of the cell of the actual plant. And those are not characteristic of oregano. Polygrains specifically too, just those are normally found with thyme. So just another, you know, we did both as we always do. And it just showed, it confirmed what we're seeing, that it was a oregano that was cross-contaminated with thyme.
Well, when you see a firecracker maybe go off in the wrong color direction or color spectrum, you maybe want to investigate why. And this is a redundancy in methods. So I think it just really illustrates the points that we wanted to hit on here with our quality investigations that we do day in and day out here at Premier Research Lab. So I just want to say thank you, gentlemen, for your time on tonight's webinar. We will be fielding questions. We want to turn this into a series here at Premier. And so, you know, I encourage, you know, as you took notes tonight, as you wrote down, maybe you have different questions in terms of industry standards or, you know, the PRL products, you know, that we offer and, you know, what we're running or what testing methods that we, you know, do with our products. And you're just looking for more information. The PRL executive team is always here to field that and act as your liaison to our quality team here at Premier Research Lab. So there is that questions email on the board here. Feel free to send those over. Also, if you want to have a question that we discuss on a future event in the very near future, hopefully, send that there, mark it as such, and we'll be happy to touch on that on our next presentation with our quality investigation team. Kind of a little forensic files series, I guess, for anybody that likes to participate or watch that television. So Nick, Kevin, any closing thoughts?
Question everything. You know, and so the truth is out there. You know, the quality standards in the industry, you know, I think things are starting to move in the right direction. Hopefully with Carol Welch there, we'll push some things through, but it's a lot about self-regulation and asking the right questions to your manufacturer. Are they going above and beyond? I mean, I encourage everybody just to ask them if they're doing aflatoxin testing. Let me know what they say. I'm very curious. But I'm doubting that many people go that far. And, you know, if you don't have the best quality, you know, botanicals, herbals, supplements, how can you expect the best outcomes? I mean, it doesn't work. And always remember, you get what you pay for too. The cheaper it is, there's probably a reason.
And kind of touch on that. We talked a little bit about economic adulterations, people that are putting things in purposefully to bulk them up, replace the expensive stuff with the cheap stuff. But adulteration also occurs accidentally, as we saw with the oregano and thyme, or as we saw with the you know, a couple of the other examples that are in there. So it happens. And if your manufacturer is using a good quality system, they're doing proper testing. They're doing proper testing with the right specifications, multiple types of testing, really looking to see whether it's contaminated or does it just pass. That gives you the product that you're looking for. You want to get only what's on the label in your product. Never know if you're going to have some sort of adverse effect or just reduced efficacy of the product because it is contaminated with something else. So question everything.
I agree. You look at consumer trends, you look at practitioner trends, it's that awareness in terms of, where there might be pitfalls in manufacturing systems. And I think we as a society are asking more, which is good. And you as a consumer or a health professional should be asking more of the manufacturers that you work with in terms of your product. So gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time and living and breathing and being a testament to everything that Premier Research Labs embodies. I'm looking forward to our future conversations on this forum here. So thank you so much. We'll catch you next month.
Take care.
All right,
you.
thank y'all.
Between the stress at the office and juggling my kids' soccer schedule, my energy was running on empty. Then I found Premier Research Labs, and they've been trusted by health practitioners for more than 35 years. Now I have the energy I had 10 years ago. I'm finally sleeping through the night, and with their digestive support, I've even shed a few pounds. Plus, Premier Research Labs products are made in the US with top quality natural ingredients and cutting edge science. I found them on Amazon, but you can learn more about them if you visit prlabs.com today and start your journey to feeling your best.